This is a part of my healing I genuinely wish I could have had someone tell me. We're gonna gamify it. You're at level 1, and there's a 100 level boss. And you're like, I'm gonna go take that on. I had a chronic illness that made me have anaphylactic reactions to stress. I'm gonna stop you there because when you find yourself back somewhere where you swear you thought you healed, it would have saved me probably a year, if not more, time off of my healing journey. It's not who you are, it's what you learned. Don't be me. Don't do that. Let me save you so much time, because when you understand it, you will be able to move forward. And it's like levels. You have to go through, you have to get the armor. I know that is a controversial topic. You felt like you failed, but actually you learned a little bit more about the situation. The door's always been open. We've just been too scared to walk outside of it.
Welcome back to the Saturn Returns channel, where we talk about healing in ways that are easy to digest, understand, and apply. And last week we talked about what healing is. These first few videos in this series are going to be about the structure of healing, what cycles you go through with this, why you can find yourself back at the same place and you might not really understand why because you thought you had healed it. We're going to dive into that today, but if you didn't check out the video from last week about what healing is, I highly recommend you go check that out. It's also a little bit of an introduction about me as well at the end, and kind of what we're going to cover in this channel. You can find that at the end of that video as well. So we're going to dive in and we're going to talk about the structure of healing. And I'm sure you've heard people say that healing isn't linear, but then what is it? And it's really kind of complex, but I found a few ways actually that we're going to talk about today to understand the structures of healing. So one of the first ways that I like to talk about what healing is, like what's the structure of it, is a spiral staircase. Imagine that you are climbing a spiral staircase. You are working on one facet of healing at that time, and each step is a lesson in healing that. Okay, and with each step that you step up, you now have a little bit more knowledge. You can see things from a different perspective so that you can then tackle it on a deeper level, because a lot of these things have many facets, and we'll get to that in a minute. But imagine it as a spiral staircase. So every single step, you are gaining a higher perspective, you are learning more that will help you dive deeper into tackling it. So you're slowly moving up this staircase. And as you start, you come around, you find yourself right back at that revolution, about to go around again. You are seeing it, you're starting this new cycle from another perspective. So a good way to look at this is when you find yourself back somewhere where you swear you thought you healed, you're rounding that staircase. It is actually an invitation to congratulate yourself and pat yourself on the back. It is not failure. You will go through these cycles many times as you are gaining the neuroplasticity that's happening, then building those new neural pathways. There's a lot of times many mindsets that are on this staircase, but imagine that every time you round it, you are healing one mindset, one part of whatever it is you're trying to accomplish in your life. You're traveling one step at a time, seeing it from a higher perspective, rounding and rounding these cycles. Okay, and there can be many in one change that you want to see in your life. We'll just take relationships for example. Let's say one of the things that you want to heal in your life is you want to have healthy relationships. There may be many mindsets sprinkled along that staircase. Okay, it's going to be sprinkled with lessons of
self-worth, boundaries, codependence maybe, knowing what you want in a relationship, knowing what you deserve in a relationship, recognizing red flags, trusting yourself, being brave enough to show up authentically, dropping the mask, stop trying to fit in, learning when to walk away, learning maybe compassion and understanding, proper communication, listening, seeing things from another person's perspective, recognizing when you're being used, understanding when you're overextending yourself to be loved.
There are so many things that might be on that staircase. So it's very important that you also don't just stare at the top of the staircase. That can be overwhelming. You could be making great progress towards this goal and not even allowing yourself to see it. And this is where we can become discouraged. And this is where it's a good idea to celebrate every little win that you have along this journey, because this gives us the momentum and it allows us to see that we can have what we want, and if we believe we can have what we want, and you will believe it if you are seeing these little steps happen. And we'll get into this in a later video because this is huge when it comes to discipline and staying consistent on things. It's actually believing you can have what you want. And that starts with recognizing your little victories each time you climb that staircase. It is so important. Do not rob yourself of those victories, because they are your momentum. And if we sit and we stare at the top of the staircase and see just how far we must be from reaching it, we've been working, but we're still not there, we might give up. The old programming will win. It will tell you you're never going to get there. Those types of relationships aren't for you. Good people don't come into your life. You're doomed to a life of terrible relationships, when this is just simply not true. So you have to stay focused on where you're at. A huge thing too we need to talk about here is that you cannot shame yourself into healing. We were shamed into our wounds by people who were shamed into their wounds. It's not who you are, it's what you learned. It's what you were taught. We have to be gentle with ourselves on this journey, or we will not have the strength or stamina to make it to the life that we want. And every single one of us deserves that and should have that life. And shame only reinforces the wounds, and it could keep us from seeing the wound clearly because we're afraid of what that makes us. And this is where, again, I want to be very clear. Your wounds are not true. What they tell you about yourself was what you learned from another generation of people who learned these things. And if you traced it back, you'd have a hard time finding an origin point. It's very important that you know that you cannot shame yourself into healing. So when you find yourself back in the same cycle, you have to understand there's still a piece you haven't seen yet. There's still something that you don't understand, because when you understand it, you will be able to move forward. If you find yourself back in that relationship and you know that it's not right for you, you will eventually be able to leave that relationship. If you find yourself back in a situation you swore you'd never be in again, it means you are trying to understand it on a deeper level. I can't tell you how many times I've had to stop myself from shaming myself and just allow myself to be where I'm at that moment, even if it's not where I want to be, without shaming myself. Okay, because I'll never be able to see clearly as long as I'm shaming myself. And it's the same for all of us. Okay, so very, very, very important that you understand that if you're there again, it doesn't mean that you're bad. It doesn't mean that you failed. It doesn't mean anything about your life except for you are now given the opportunity to see it from a different perspective and gain the perspective you need to finally break free from it. Very, 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 very important. Now I have an analogy that would have saved me probably a year, if not more, time off of my healing journey. And it's taken me 3 years to get here. And I'm telling you, if you follow the steps, you will get there way faster than I got there. Okay, so this is for my ruminators, my overthinkers, the overachievers, the perfectionists, the Virgo babies out there. This is for you. It's another analogy on the healing journey, and we're going to gamify it. Okay, imagine there's a door. It's got like 50 locks on it. You are over here at the starting line, and there's this straight line, but there are little side quests. Okay, and you get there to one of those, you can't move forward because you need to do these side quests. The keys to the door are there. Okay, and so if you were to just sit at the starting line staring at the door, this is not going to open the door. This is why we can't look so far ahead. Yes, we need to look ahead so we can stay motivated about the life that we want, but we can't just stare at the door and obsess over healing because we're not living. And that's where the side quests are. Okay, and I have a lot of air in my chart, very analytical. So sometimes I would spend all day while I was stuck bedridden in my mind, not living. And in the living is where you run into the problematic mindsets. Okay, you can run into them when you're obsessing and ruminating too, but when you go to try and actually live your life or go after something you want or find yourself in a situation that would normally be triggering for you, that's where you're going to get the information. That's where you're going to find the keys. So let me save you so much time. If you've dug, okay, if you've dug and you can't find the clarity you're looking for, it's time to move on. It's time to just live your life and trust that it's coming. Because one thing I can tell you about the healing journey is an idea is presented to us by our subconscious, so we can recognize it. Because again, and this goes into, there's a lot of different techniques that talk about this. You can't heal what you can't see. Admitting it is the first step, that type of thing, right? So something is brought to our consciousness first that we want to heal, and we know it's a problem, but we can't see all the little things that created this mindset, right? This is why it's very important for us to live. We're now focusing on something, which is a good thing. But if you don't have the clarity and you've dug in and you're like, okay, where could this mindset have come from? What part of my life did I start feeling this way? How long have I been feeling this way? How does this mindset show up for me? If you've dug, and you can't get to the bottom of a feeling or a thought, you gotta let it go, because it means that you're not there yet. I promise you, if you keep going, you will get the information. It's kind of cool. It trickles in like at the right timing, the perfect timing. And some clarity can't come in until we've had another clarity before that. I've seen that so many times where they build, like the staircase, right? They build on top of each other. And so we literally can't grasp the concept that we are trying to find yet, because we're still on the side quest looking for the next key. Maybe our next side quest gives us that key, but we're not there yet. They build, and we are confronted with these things as we are ready and as we have the information to actually do something about them, okay? And so I spend a lot of time staring at the door or up at the door wanting it to open. Don't do that. Don't be me. Don't do that. It is not fun, and you're not making any progress. So the best thing that you can do, get up, live your life. Even some of the most mundane things are so relevant that you don't even understand. Like I can tell you how many times I've gotten to the door to unlock it, and when I finally unlock it and I have that huge breakthrough and the programming is solidified, I look back and I see like a montage of all the times and all the decisions and all of the little things that I had to go through and the little points in my life that I lived that brought me to that conclusion. And some of them seem seemingly irrelevant. And that's another thing, is that sometimes when you're healing things along one line, you're actually healing things along another line too, so that you haven't gotten to yet, which makes that process a little faster. Healing is kind of like snowballing. It starts really slow, but then as it compounds and gets bigger, it starts to really take off and really take off with momentum, which is why sometimes we don't see the progress right away. But this is so important for us analytical thinkers. My channel, I think, is going to help a lot of the analytical ones, the ones where you hear you can't think your way into healing. I'm gonna stop you there, because most of healing is thinking. It's just thinking about how you think, assessing and analyzing it, and changing it. Feelings are involved, yes, and that was a really hard part for me as a thinker, and we'll get to that when I go through the how to feel your feelings, how to process your feelings, things like that. But majority of the work takes place in the mind. That's where we can also heal things like anxiety as well, because most of my anxiety, and remember, I had a chronic illness that made me have anaphylactic reactions to stress, which comes from anxiety. And where did it originate? Up here. Overthinking, worrying about things that I don't have any idea how it's going to turn out, because it's in the future and I'm in the present. I'm in the infinite now. Just be aware that if you are standing at that starting line, you've been made aware of something, you're not expected to know how to heal it yet. Okay, that's what the journey is. And also be aware, when you open one door, you're going to step through and there's going to be another one and you're back on the line again. It's like levels. Okay, and this will go on for quite some time. But the next door might only have 10 locks on it, because it's a smaller, more subtle change. And a lot of times there's a lot of series of these little smaller doors to get to that big door. You know what I mean? Like, this was just an analogy to kind of give you a way to visualize and conceptualize what healing is, how it works, why you keep finding yourself back at the same things and feeling bad about yourself, shame, like you somehow should have known something that you couldn't possibly have known. A lot of the stuff that I'm even hearing myself say right now, years ago, I could not have heard this. I was too stuck in victim mentality. I was too stuck in identifying with my trauma to even have been able to comprehend and take in this information. And it's like that a lot on our healing journey, which is why we can't rush it. And just because we want it, we want to be there, we want to unlock that door, we can't yet. There is a set of steps that have to be followed. Another part of this door analogy I want to cover is that when we're overthinking and we're in our heads about healing because we just so desperately want to heal, which is great, it is great. But when we are in that place, we are actually at a halt. If you reach a point where you do not have any more information that will help you, you have to move forward and live your life and allow it to present itself, because otherwise you are at a halt. And this is a part of my healing. I genuinely wish I could have had someone tell me. I did know that I was ruminating and overthinking, but I thought if I didn't keep doing it and keep digging, I wouldn't find the answer. I would not be able to have access to them because I wouldn't have understood them. Very important, especially if you're a perfectionist overachiever, you're halting yourself if you just stand there staring at the door. And that's what we're doing when we dig, but we can't find an answer and we just keep going over and over and over again. We have to just live and allow that information information to come into us, okay? It's also very important to understand that you have to take breaks in this process, and this is not failure. This is allowing your system to recalibrate, your nervous system to relax, because again, anytime we go against our natural programming, our old programming, the subconscious programming we gained as a child, this is going to put our nervous system on edge. And if you are reaching a really, really anxious point, this is a good indicator that you need to take a step back and rest. Allow your nervous system to come down. The healing journey will still be there for you, but we're trying to do too much at once. And this can be, it's hard, especially when you really, really want to heal. But we also start at a level of healing that we can handle, and we have to learn its lessons to prepare us for those boss battles. And sometimes after a boss battle too, we kind of need a rest. Okay, you got to respect your body. You got to respect your life. You have a life too. Okay, and so you're gonna have to take time out, and that doesn't mean you're failing. Okay, that's just a part of the process, and it's you need rest. Okay, you need it. And I know that this can be frustrating because we feel like for a while we're not seeing progress and we're healing seemingly unimportant things when the things that we truly wanted to heal are still keeping us miserable. And that is a hard part of healing. As you start the journey, you're excited. You're like, I'm going to heal this part of my life. And along that journey, you're like, okay, but I'm healing all of these things and they seem, but I wanted to heal that. Healing these things is how you heal that. And that's a hard thing to swallow for a bit too, because while you're healing these little things, these big things are still wreaking havoc on your life. And you know they need to be healed. You know you need to figure it out, but right now you're over here and it's over there. You will get there. Rest assured, you will get there. If you were to go up against that boss battle right now, over here, when you're over here and it's over here, you would fail and you would potentially spiral over that or lose your confidence. That this is why we start with the smaller things. The smaller mindsets are presented to us first. They're easier for us to wrap our minds around, and we gain the confidence through tackling those and seeing that change in those areas. So I know you're over here, you just started and you're looking over there, you're like, I really want to heal that though. Why am I doing this? I need to be healing this. It's a process, and you have to trust the process, which is probably something that you're frustrated with hearing, especially if you're in the spiritual community, but it is true, and things have an order that they go in for your own safety, for your own success, because you need those little wins. You need those little things that you heal first to gain that confidence as you go to fight something like Chiron, if you're into astrology. Okay, that's your deepest soul wound, and you cannot win against that when you're over here and you're learning these little things. Now, each thing is important. It is incredibly important. I wouldn't say any of them are any more important than the other, but they lead us towards those bigger boss battles, and we kind of just have to accept that and know that as long as we're taking those steps, we're going to make it to that boss battle. And by the time we make it there, it's going to be much easier, and it will, because I have been tackling my Chiron, and while it has still been hard, it is possible, and I don't think I would have been able to do that even a year ago. So keep that in mind. One other way to visualize this is that you just started a new game. You're at level 1 and there's a 100 level boss, and you're like, I'm gonna go take that on. Okay, we can't do that. We can't do that. How do you think that's going to play out? Okay, you have to go through, you have to get the armor, you have to get the skills, you have to get the little extras that you get in the game in order to be able to tackle that. But eventually you are able to tackle it, and you've actually gone so far into your journey, tackling it becomes a lot easier than you think it's going to be. Now, I didn't fully touch on this in the last video because it was the first video, but I told you that I have something that was thought to be incurable. When I was 16 years old, I was in a mental hospital and told that had I been 18 years old, I would have been diagnosed with BPD, borderline personality disorder. And for a long time, I tucked that away and didn't think anything about it because I didn't want to, because of the stigma around it. Later on in my adult life, I looked up the criteria and I fit every single criteria for BPD. I exhibited more quiet BPD. I internalized the stuff rather than outbursts on other people. Now, it did still happen sometimes. But I am now at a point where I do not meet the criteria for BPD. I do not meet the criteria, any of the criteria for BPD. And so I know for a fact that this stuff can be healed. It is mindsets. All of the stuff with BPD is distorted mindsets. And mindsets can be healed through neuroplasticity and neuroscience, what we've learned about how we can learn things all throughout our lives. Even older people can apply this stuff. It gets a little bit harder as we get older. Neuroplasticity is not quite as agile and good as it used to be, but it is still possible all throughout our lives. And I have seen massive changes in myself. I also had a fearful avoidant attachment style, which I have been healing. So I understand what it's like to feel like anxiously attached, and I also understand what it's like to feel avoidantly attached. And so this gives me a unique perspective into a large amount of people, because many fall into those if they don't have a healthy attachment style. And if I can work through these really distorted thinking patterns, I know that anyone can do it. And I'm also of the mindset that all the cluster B disorders can be healed, but I know that is a controversial topic, but I believe that it can be. I'm going to be looking at my notes a little bit through this section, so I make sure that I do not forget anything that's important here. We will be going into exactly how to tackle neural reprogramming for yourself throughout this channel, where we'll tackle specific belief systems and what might be standing in your way and how to reprogram it step by step. But for today, we are learning what healing looks like so that you can maintain your momentum and not get discouraged when it seems like nothing is happening. I promise it's happening. It's just that the new neural pathways are still very weak when we first start forming them, and the old ones are very strong. This goes into that whole level 1, level 100. You have to build up the level of that neural pathway to be able to even combat this one. And this is why sometimes it feels like we're lying to ourselves when we try to implement these new mindsets, because we truly believe the old ones about ourselves, how we fit into the world, how to interact with the world, how the world sees us, all of these things. We truly believe them. So we feel like we're lying to ourselves whenever we introduce these new concepts, and we just have to keep trusting that we're going to get where we're going, okay? Because we will, but it's going to happen slowly over time. The old programming is so loud and so strong, and the little voice of the new programming seems like a little whisper, but then it grows and it grows and it grows, and eventually it becomes the things that start popping into your head instead of the old one. But this is a process. So the only thing you really need to start healing is a want to heal, a genuine want and commitment to heal, because it is all mindsets. It's all things that can be overcome. We just have to want to heal. But we do have to want to keep healing every day if it's going to take its effect. And it will require discipline from us, that at first we're going to fall down. You're going to fall down sometimes. That's okay. It lets you see what about that made it too hard for me to continue? What mindset felt too big for me to overcome? And how can I show it the evidence that I can do it, if that's the thing that's possible? Sometimes we do have evidence. Like once you've healed some things, you can look back at that old programming and say, look, I understand you're trying to keep me safe, but look at what I've already done. Look at how I'm creating a safe environment for us in another way. There can be evidence, because the brain is highly evidence-based. And a lot of times when we start, the only evidence we have is distorted things like confirmation bias, which largely we've self-sabotaged our way into. Confirmation bias can start when we're children and we're in a situation beyond our control, but we allow it to continue in our adult life through self-sabotage, through confirmation bias. Confirmation bias says the brain is always looking for evidence as to why it's right. And so it will perceive situations distortedly sometimes, even to prove that it is right. And because of that, it will cause us to self-sabotage, leave situations, turn down opportunities, not take the steps that we need to, because of the distorted thinking patterns and confirmation bias. When you were a child, or whenever you developed this trauma, the confirmation bias was right. You were stuck in a situation that you felt trapped in, that you could not get out of. But after that, it's no longer right when you have left that situation, and you have to allow yourself to perceive it differently. You have to allow yourself to reparent. This is a big thing, I think, is reparenting, is seeing something as if you're approaching it for the first time, and allowing the new things that you know and understand to fill in that old programming to create the new programming. So in the next video, we're going to get into the actual steps. We now know what is healing, what is the structure of healing, like the spiral staircase, why we can't jump to another level that we do not qualify for yet, why it has to be that way. The next episode, we're going to talk about the actual steps of healing, and it's going to be in my video about what is the observer. You've probably heard this concept. It's mentioned in mindfulness, Buddhist techniques, things like that, but it's very abstract and obscure a lot of times when you hear about it in videos, and we are going to break it down. It is also called metacognition. If you'd like to look into it between now and next Monday, you're welcome to do that little bit of homework. And sometimes I may give you guys little homeworks if you want to see what you can work through. If you want to do a little homework this time, you can think of the times that you've cycled back around and maybe you felt like you failed, but actually you learned a little bit more about the situation. This can start to give your new programming evidence. And remember, the brain wants evidence, which is why it can be really hard when we first start with these new neural pathways, because the brain really wants that evidence, and the new neural pathway doesn't have any evidence. This is why we have to take the steps to act on our new programming as well, to give that evidence. And yes, those steps are going to be monumentally hard sometimes. Sometimes it's not all in the mind. You actually have to take the steps that back what you want and the life that you want, and it can be incredibly hard when the old programming is trying so hard to keep you in a cage, but the door's always been open. We've just been too scared to walk outside of it. And that's what I'm trying to help you with here on this channel, is to recognize that you're in a cage, but also recognize that the door is open and you can leave. So next week we'll talk about the observer, what all of that means, and we're going to go through the exact steps that you can apply to every single part of your healing, no matter where you are at in it. It applies to everything. And I was going to put it in this video, but the video would have been way too long if I did that, so we'll go over that next week. This week, just try to think about those cycles that you find yourself in, what parts of your healing have felt daunting and you really wanted to see them, but you've kind of either fallen down or maybe even given up because you felt like you weren't seeing the progress because you still had all those keys you needed to get. So maybe identifying the cycles that have been the hardest, and maybe what things could be standing in your way. We'll get to the mindset stuff after we get through the observer stuff, how to feel your feelings, all of that stuff. We're going to walk through the basics. And I know we want to get to the exciting parts, and we will, and I'll take your specific questions. So if you have any, leave them down below in the comment. Some of your questions will become videos. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you continue to stay where we are healing together and making things a little bit easier for ourselves and going after the life we want. So bye guys.